You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk, or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just text FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911 right now to get started. That's FINANCE, FINANCE, to 357-911. Auto financing the easy way. Text FINANCE to 357-911.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now. 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures. Saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Oh, beautiful, our heroes proved in liberating strife. Self, their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, make God thy gold refine.
There, the puck is still loose. 11 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Schultz. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill O'Reilly. I'm here joined by Liz Neuerfeld, and you're listening to For Immediate Release. Thank you for joining with us tonight. We're going to have a really fun show. We're going to talk about a number of things, including a man who everybody is talking about in America, of course, the now late Senator John McCain. We're going to be actually having on the show later this evening a classmate of the senators, a gentleman named John Nickerson, who was a classmate of Senator McCain's at Annapolis many, many years ago. And he's going to talk a little bit about what the senator was like during those days. And I don't think I know John very, very well. Liz hasn't met him, but Liz is going to be asking him some questions too. How are you doing tonight, Liz?
Oh, Billy, so great, and it's really great to be on the show again with you tonight. And like you said, I join millions of people here in this country and around the world who are trying to celebrate the life of an incredible patriot, senator, and just American, John McCain. And I just think it's remarkable to see the spontaneous tributes that have sprung up everywhere, including right in Hanoi, and never mind, in the U.S. Capitol in Arizona, where he was, where he served and was so beloved. But it speaks so much to not only his public service, but much more importantly, really to the man that he was and the people he touched and how he touched them. So we're going to talk a lot about that when John joins us, and I'm looking forward to talking to him. Thanks for getting him on.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. Years ago, I went to Hanoi, 2002, November 2002. I went to Hanoi with my sister, who you know well, Priscilla, and I was looking for the Hanoi Hilton, and I knew the name in Vietnamese, but I can't speak Vietnamese, so it was gobbledygook, whatever I was saying. and we met a young man on the street who was destitute. In fact, I just wrote a column on Newsday about this, which is running now, and we hit him with everything we possibly could to get the idea of where is the Howlow prison, the Hanoi Hilton, and nothing. I mean, there was absolutely nothing. You could wave, you could wink. There was nothing. We just couldn't communicate with him. And I finally said, John McCain, and the kid's face just lit up. And he said, John McCain, John McCain. And he grabbed my sister's hand and my hand and ran us right over to the Hanoi Hilton, which was just about a block and a half away from where we were. We had no idea, because it doesn't appear on the tourist maps of Hanoi. And even when you go in, they play up the French atrocities there against the Vietnamese, and they still propagandize that it was all unicorns and rainbows for the Americans. But he brought us right there, and it was just amazing to see what his name meant to them, because McCain had gone back after having a very difficult 5.5 years in their prison, and actually worked to normalize relations and insisted on it and put it all behind him. And they, he's a national hero there also. So you're right, Liz, they're celebrating.
Well, even, I don't know if you saw this story late this afternoon. I was just reading how a former Vietnamese soldier who ran the prison where John McCain was held captive said on Sunday that he respected and liked the late senator, that he actually had met him several times while McCain was held captive there. And, at the time that he liked him personally for his toughness and his strong stance. But more to your point, he praised him and gives him all the credit in the world for normalizing relations. And as we know, because we actually lived through all of this politically, he and John Kerry got together with Bill Clinton, who was president at the time, to make that happen, which is probably the most extraordinary thing you could say about the man, that a guy who was literally beaten to within an inch of his life not only forgave his captors, but made a point of doing everything he could to make sure that this didn't happen again, it didn't hurt future generations. I don't know. We also know the other work he did, again, to ban torture. He was against waterboarding. But I don't know. There isn't another example I can even begin to think of that comes close to doing what Senator McCain did for that to happen.
And it's true. And he had a lot of fights throughout his life. He rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. There were times that I didn't love him at days. I mean, I always admired him, and I was a big fan of his politically. During his presidential race, I was disappointed at times, but he would always come back, whatever the fight he was picking, and even if you disagreed with him, he was always there with a handshake at the end of the day. It was always water under the bridge and let's work together next time. And it kind of reminded me of the old ethos of a little bit of, you go out there and you play hard in the field, and at the end of the game, you pick each other up and you slap each other in the back and go have a beer.
Well, yeah, it's so interesting. I worked on a presidential campaign back in 1988. John McCain wasn't one of the candidates at the time, but I had an experience up in New Hampshire where I really had a chance to appreciate what retail politics means. And everyone, I always say this, anyone should take a chance, if you can't work on a campaign, to just go up to New Hampshire or Iowa, but New Hampshire during a presidential cycle and see what it means to really engage with politicians who want your vote. And back in 2007, over the Christmas vacation, between Christmas and New Year's, my kids were all in school, and their friends were all going off on their family ski vacations into the Bahamas and whatnot. And I dragged my kids to New Hampshire to see John McCain and a few other candidates at the time. I'm such a nerd, and they were grousing the whole ride up, but they were really starstruck and awestruck. And it was when McCain was getting back in the game. He was flat broke. He was going door to door, basically paying for his own gas and his own hotels and his staff, trying to make his way back. And as we all know, he scratched and clawed and got the nomination. But to watch him, he really invented that whole town hall dynamic, even though candidates had always been doing stump speeches and, going to barns and standing on, bales of hay. But there was something about his what you said, his fierce spirit and his straight talk express that resonated even for people who didn't like him or vote for him. They were drawn to him. Nobody drew audiences like he did. It was remarkable until, of course, Obama came along. Yeah, you're absolutely right. He was self-deprecating. He was funny as hell, and he worked so hard. I mean, he came into New York. I remember after he lost the 2000 primary. He came in just a few weeks later and did a Lincoln Day dinner for us. I at a dinner in Manhattan, and he came in, and I remember it was a blizzard, and the planes were shut down. The airports were shut down, so he took a train up to do it. And this was to help a state party that did not help him at all, that tried to keep him off the ballot. And then in 2002, there was a local assembly race in Manhattan, and there was a woman named Gail Hilson who had helped, John McCain in some way. And so he came to campaign with us one morning, and we asked for what we said. We're doing a subway station in the morning, 86th Street and Lexington Avenue. And he said, we get there early. He goes, well, I'll meet you there at 5:45. And it's like, boy, this guy really is in the Navy. And
So I got there at 5:45, and he showed up, at 5:40. He got there a moment later, and as he came up, a pigeon dropped a big one on his head. And I said, welcome to New York, Senator. That was my introduction to him. And he just thought that was the funniest thing in the world. But the point is that here was a guy who just won for president, and he was willing to come and campaign for a state assembly candidate in New York. He came from Arizona. You know what I mean? Just amazing.
Yeah.
That takes will and drive.
And I never knew until this afternoon that he and Mike Bloomberg were so close. And Mike Bloomberg actually today in his tribute over the last 2 days, credited McCain with actually helping him win his first election, said it really put him over the finish line, that he campaigned for him in Staten Island, his first mayoral race. And then I was reading tonight that Mayor Bloomberg's going to be a pallbearer at the service in Washington this weekend.
Oh, that's interesting.
McCain and by the way, so is Warren Beatty. He had relationships that he built and then nurtured for decades that I think a lot of people would be surprised to know about.
And people on the left and the right. I mean, that was the whole point of it, which sometimes annoyed people on the right, that he would be the maverick and take positions that were to the left of what they wanted or just different than what they wanted. But that was John McCain. I mean, and if you didn't like it, he'd, punch me in the nose and I'll punch you back, and then we'll go have a beer, and that was the way he operated.
I don't know if you had a chance to see Rick Davis today on TV. Rick was McCain's campaign manager, yes, and long time confidant. And I saw him first on CBS and with Gayle King and those folks, and then later on reading McCain's sort of final statement. But Rick was talking about why having George W. Bush and President Obama both speak at the service in Washington, and the fact that McCain chose the two men who kept him from the job he wanted most. So to come forward and actually speak on his behalf really, as much as anything else, shows how much he puts the country first. That, at the end of the day, we all have to get behind one major goal, and that is making sure that this country is living up to its ideals and its values.
But that's the thing that's missing.
He breathed it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's missing. And let's forget the conversation about Donald Trump. It's done to death. And let's take Trump aside. Yeah. He's one president. Yes, he's one man. But it's whether Trump's in the office or not. It's an issue that America's had now for a couple of decades, where there's not that feeling of common spirit, and it ain't going to work for us. It's not going to work.
No. And, Billy, let's talk about your column today in Newsday. I just love the headline, John McCain stands out in age of moral relativism. I think the whole column was great, but, you particularly talked about how honor and virtue are immutable, right, fixtures. And it's men who waver, but those two things don't, or they shouldn't. And that's certainly... we haven't seen enough of that. That's for sure. I think you and I were talking earlier. It long precedes this administration. That's for sure.
Liz, it's funny because you picked out exactly the part of the column that I really wanted to write, which is that it's so easy for anybody, for we mortals, to start to rationalize what we do and to reconfigure our values or our ethics or our morals, whatever we want to call them, to fit the behavior that we're doing. And McCain never did that. Like, McCain would make a mistake and then cop to it. And that's what I meant by that his values were immutable. It was that, man errs, not the values. The values remain where they are. They're carved into stone on the wall. And those are the rules. And yes, we break them because we're all human and we all screw up, and some more than others. Certainly I do. But don't change the rules because you're screwing them up. And that's what McCain did, like when he apologized in South Carolina for being dishonest with how he felt about the Confederate flag. Whatever side of that issue you're on, he said to the American people that he would always speak the truth as he believed it. And he came and said, I didn't. I compromised. I thought I would win more votes if I went one way, and I didn't believe it, and I lied to you. And that's an example of the type of values that I grew up with. It's hard to live up to them, but don't change them to make it easier for yourself.
Well, also, I think one of the things that's so striking about that particular circumstance was that he apologized and owned it right away. I mean, within very short time. It wasn't 30 years later upon reflection, if I offended anybody, I apologize, all that nonsense, or mistakes were made, or he was very clear that he sold out for some votes, which backfired anyway.
Right, exactly.
So it was a lose-lose, and we all know this. We know when we're not being honest with ourselves. So that stuff catches up to you, whether in the short term or the long term. And I'd be hard-pressed to name 2 or 3 other or any other politicians or leaders who have owned their mistakes like that in such a public way.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I don't mean to, and I don't say this to take anything away from Senator McCain. It's also good politics. It's good politics. I mean,
of course, yes, that's right.
People are people. People understand it, and people appreciate when you own up to it. And I don't understand why more people in elective office don't cop to their sins. Basically, you don't have to call them sins.
They all claim that they have. They all actually try to claim that they have some kind of a clinical diagnosis that they can attribute their lies to. I mean, I'm looking at what's going on out on the West Coast right now with Duncan Hunter, who, as we all know from news reports, is accused of stealing $250,000 worth of donor money. He'll call it misappropriating or misallocation of resources, for his own, fancy trips and cars and golf outings and the like. And he's blaming the media, and he's blaming Democrats, and he's blaming anyone but himself. He's even blaming his wife. And you think, and you know what? He's still up in the polls. How can this be possible? Is the bar so low that people aren't even remotely surprised that a politician misuses campaign funds? It just can't be.
Yeah. I mean, especially you don't throw your wife under the bus, for God's sakes. I mean, I know.
Really I've been thrown under the bus in my house, but
that's right. But Joe wasn't running for office at the time, But it's
No.
you go back to like whatever that movie was with Harrison Ford. When they're in the Oval Office and the president, everyone's advising that he throw a friend under the bus. And they said, no, you call him a good friend. You don't say you kind of knew him. you go the other way.
Right,
you be honest about it. And it's maybe a lost art. And I don't mean to say it's just an art with John McCain, but it's both the right thing to do. If you'll forgive the antiquated expression, it's the manly thing to do from a male perspective, but it's also an effective thing to do. And when you don't lie, you don't have to remember what you said. And that really helps in all of life.
I think, and I know we're going to get John, I don't know if he's already lined up and ready to jump on the phone with us, but, one of the things that's so touching is in reading all the tributes and also reading McCain and seeing clips and hearing him in his own words, his complete, embracing of gratitude and his expression of gratitude for life and for this country and for the opportunity that this country has given him is remarkable. And people a lot who've suffered the loss of a family member or loved one or gone through some crisis, and that will come out a lot. Whether it's I took something for granted or I didn't realize it, but I think gratitude for everything he had here is a lesson that we could all learn something from.
Hello, Liz. I think we may have an old friend of mine on the line. Is this John Nickerson?
It is indeed.
Oh, John, it is a great honor to have you on. I want to introduce you to Liz Neuer-Feld, my co-host, who I've told her all about you, and to our listeners. Thank you so much for being on.
Well, my pleasure.
Welcome, John.
And John, where are you calling in from? You're out of Cape Cod in Massachusetts?
Yes.
That's terrific.
Where
we've got
are you guys?
I'm in New York, and Liz is in Boston, and then other people are listening.
I'm in New York right now.
Oh, you're in New York. Okay. But John,
John, let me just tell you, John, before you start, that my son has been working for the Cape Cod Baseball League for the last couple of summers, and then this summer he was actually down there helping out this scouting department for the Chicago Cubs. So you're in God's country there.
Ah.
So John, can you tell me? I know that you went to the Naval Academy with Senator McCain, and we just would love to have some of your thoughts about what it was like to be at school with him. Any anecdotes you might have, and what your thoughts are about his passing and what he meant to the country. But in any order you'd like, we'd love to listen to you.
Well, bless your heart. Thank you. Yeah, I've been grieving, I guess, like everybody else. He and I were classmates at Annapolis, and more than that, friends. The thing we seem to have in common is that we were both in trouble quite frequently. It's a very highly regulated military system with lots of rules and regulations and stuff. And the Academy has a demerit system where every time you violate a rule or your shoes aren't shined enough, you get some demerits. And every 5 demerits you have to work off by on the weekends while other people are on liberty. Have to get all dressed up in white gloves and a rifle and go out on the courtyard and march slowly and silently for an hour for every 5 demerits. And very often on a Saturday afternoon, you could find Johnny McCain and I both, we weren't being silent, we were, talking to each other quietly, but we would be both marching these so-called punishment tours. We lived down the hall from each other for the 4 years. We were often in the same class together academically. He was part of what was kind of new to me, a subculture at the Academy of so-called Navy juniors. Both my roommates were Navy juniors, the sons of admirals, and people, the whole subculture of folks who grew up in the military. And of course, Johnny was part of that. His dad and his grandfather were both 4-star admirals. His grandfather got a Navy Cross leading a carrier strike force in the Pacific in World War II. And as I guess everybody is aware in the news, when he was a POW, the North Vietnamese found out that his father at that time was Cinque Pac, which is the area commander for the whole Pacific. And he was, during the war, everybody thought General Westmoreland was in charge, but Westmoreland's boss was Admiral McCain. So the North Vietnamese, when they found that out, they offered him this deal of, we'll let you out early if you can, talk to your dad. And to his great credit, and the real heroism was that he said, no, he's not leaving until everybody else left. At the Academy, he was very close to being the anchor man. There's a big tradition, the guy that's last in the class, we used to say there, but for the grace of God goes a civilian. And those who... I'm sorry?
You're making... Liz was laughing.
I was giggling. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and those who are close to the bottom as it gets near graduation, again, as I said, you're graded and ranked and rated on everything. And some folks compete for the so-called honor of being the anchor man. There's a park at Annapolis at the Academy reserved for the first anchor person to make admiral. It hasn't happened yet. And Johnny, who was a smart guy, but not a student by any means, and as I said, often, as I was in trouble with the system. But he was 5th from the bottom, and that was pretty close to being the anchor person. And I'm remembering, I hadn't seen much of him since. I've seen him at reunions and such, but I remember when he was on the forestall flying. He was an aviator, of course, and there was this big accident, and he was involved in it. His plane crashed, and there was a big fire on the aircraft carrier. And he was in the news briefly, just interviewed us. And I remember being at the bar at the Officers Club in Norfolk, I think, and several of us saw this on TV, and there was McCain, and we all kind of laughed and had a drink. There he is, screwing up again. But today I find I'm grieving him. He was really, really a hero in the very, very best sense of the word, and I think that somehow there's something poignant, especially about his passing just now, and this president that we have, that the contrast between the two are such extreme that it just makes Johnny stand out, much more so as a hero.
And John, did you see anything, like, knowing Senator McCain as a fairly young man? You both were, I guess, in your early 20s, late teens. Do you
Yes.
think that his maverick style helped his leadership capacity later on? Is there something about that spirit?
Yeah, I think so. It was, something about him that was rebellious and defiant, but he was, people from the academies are kind of famous for their integrity. I mean, he was really his own man, and he came up in this tradition of service, which was even in his family, multi-generations. And so, in Washington, where so much of everything is political, he was very skilled, but, he was a person of honor and integrity. And so, he wasn't going to just do something for Arizona or for some political expediency. He was a person of honor and integrity. And it seems to me that there's not much of that in Washington anymore.
John, what does that mean to a naval officer? Like, for those of us who didn't serve in the Navy or in the armed forces, but particularly didn't attend the service academies, how much is the notion of honor ingrained in you, and what does it mean when it comes down to it?
Well, it's very big. The motto at West Point is duty, honor, country. Like, we were sort of morally challenged from the beginning. I mean, part of the code of conduct at the academy was that we will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor will we allow any amongst us who would do that. At the same time, there was an unwritten kind of code of you never bilge a classmate. And so sometimes there was that conflict of, is my obligation to my classmate, or is my obligation to the system? And those often make for difficult choices, but over time I think that they bespeak a certain kind of integrity and a certain I don't know, again, I guess it's honor.
John, we talked about earlier, Liz mentioned that there were spontaneous outpourings of grief in Hanoi for Senator McCain. Is what he did in Vietnam after the war, specifically in the 90s and 2000s, when he worked so hard to normalize relations between the two nations, is that part of that honor code? Do you think that was part of the reason?
Yes, I think so. And it's like, it's service duty to something larger than myself. And, that often means, and this is true of his political career, bringing diverse people together. And, it may be that he felt a certain guilt about, having bombed Hanoi or whatever, and that, but again, to bring people together, to heal, to try to be devoted to something larger than your own ego.
And John, while we have you, I wonder if we could steal you for 5 extra minutes. I was telling Liz earlier about your other life, and you've had a couple as a as an actor and then as a founder of Pathways to Freedom. And and I'm wondering if you're willing just for a few minutes to talk a little bit about Pathways for Freedom and what it's done, and then maybe any advice you might have for anyone out there who's struggling. I should say that you helped and got sober, and we'll be forever grateful for it. And we'd love if you have a moment to talk about some of the work that you've done.
Well, thank you. My roommates at Annapolis would tell you I was the only drama major in the history of the Naval Academy. But my big extracurricular activity was acting, and as a senior, I was head of the drama group, which is one of the oldest undergraduate theater groups in the country. And then many years later, I'm an addict, and at age 39, I got sober in New York City, and started to, live a sober lifestyle. And I went through a lot of dramatic stuff. I was robbed 4 times in Manhattan. I was shot at once. Went through bankruptcy. But I was one of the co-founders of Pathways to Freedom, which is an addiction services agency. And for over 30 years, I was the CEO. And Pathways has developed over the decades quite a remarkable record of success with addiction, which is very, very difficult. And today, to this very day, we're talking about the opioid epidemic here, especially in Massachusetts. And there's just a lot of, one of the symptoms of addiction is denial, that old river in Egypt. And addiction is a family disorder. Everybody in the family has it. And we just seem to focus on the addict, But it's been, very, very gratifying for me to be able to, as an addict myself, to develop a program and an agency that, helped and served so many addicts and their family members. And one of the wonderful things for me is that in sobriety, in recovery, I finally got to do some real professional acting. I supported myself in New York City for a few years as an actor, which is not easy, especially coming to it later in my life, in my 40s. And I have one Broadway credit, which I'm very proud of, a play called Heartland, which was at the Century Theater in Broadway. And I thought getting a Broadway credit would launch my career. It didn't. But it did launch the career of a young man who was 19 at the time, who was a young actor from California who was in Heartland as well, and that was Sean Penn. So, yeah, that was interesting. And most of my acting was daytime soap operas. But to me, it was finally a lifelong ambition fulfilled, and I couldn't have done it if I hadn't been sober.
And John, forgive me for not recalling, but was it Days of Our Lives was the one? Which was your?
Yeah, one of them, Days of Our Lives. I worked mostly on All My Children,
right?
Which was ABC, I think. And I remember once they do these sweeps. I guess every so often they have ratings weeks, and so the writers and the people on the daytime show, they do this, I guess, on the evening shows as well. But during ratings week, they try to do something dramatic to spike the ratings. And I remember this one time I was playing the role of a policeman coming to the door to bring bad news to somebody whose wife or something had died. And they just played that over and over again because it was, kind of dramatic.
Exactly. Or you could have had that park named after you at Annapolis.
Yeah.
Liz, go ahead. I thought you were going to ask something.
Well, no, I just wanted to thank you for the work you've done there, John. I actually serve on the board of Shatterproof, which is a national addiction organization, and we're very focused on policy reform right now and access to treatment, but also prescription monitoring programs and a number of other, frankly, big policy changes that need to be reforms that need to be made at the state and local level. So, and licensing of providers so that these victims and their families don't get ripped off by charlatan treatment centers. And so the work you've been doing for years is so vitally important. You know, it's very rare that you could do something where you can quantify how many lives you've saved, but yours clearly is countless. But, you know, the kind of addiction that we're dealing with now with this opioid crisis is unlike anything this country's ever seen. And, you know, there are a lot of well-intentioned elected officials in Washington at the state level who are now trying to get their heads around this and throwing a lot of money at it and just trying to play catch up with a disease that, you know, killing 120 people a day. So, which is staggering, not to mention the criminal enterprise that's such a big part of this. So doing this one town and one village at a time is really the only way this is going to we're going to make any progress. But I know that, you know, the situation on Cape Cod as it is in areas like Long Island, you know, and all over the country, it's just it's devastating to families, to schools, to communities. So we need leaders and people with experience like you to help. So thank you for what you're doing. Well,
Bless your heart. Thank you. Yeah, it's addiction is, as I said much earlier on, that one of the big symptoms is denial. They get worse with time. They're fatal, you know. And like we have, you know, I was at an Al-Anon meeting tonight, and they were celebrating an anniversary, and they had ice cream and cookies and stuff. I'm a food addict. You know, ice cream, sugar is like a drug for me. We're always talking about overweight and obesity and nutrition. Nobody talks about food addiction or sugar addiction, but it's very, very real, you know. So it's a complicated disease, and it is epidemic, and you know, we need to try to break down this denial, I guess, talk about it more, educate more about it, and of course prevention. I mean, we talk as if it's the substances that are addictive, and it's not the substances. The substances all have their various effects and so on, but what's addictive is the people, you know. And addicts they're not born really, but they are made growing up. You have a sensitive child who's not properly parented, and that sets that person up to become an addict. And, you know, in all this discussion, we don't talk about parenting. And especially if you have a super sensitive child, how do you parent that child? We don't talk about that, and yet that's the primary source of addiction.
Yes, yeah, so
anyway.
John, I have one story to leave you with, and thank you so much for your generosity with your time. Liz was running for the state senator a number of years ago in New York, and she had to go and speak before an audience, and she went down to a room, and people were filing in, and they were all sitting in the audience with the podium up front, and she thought, geez, I got a pretty good crowd going. You know, my name is getting out there. And then someone got to the front. Liz thought to introduce her, and he said, "You know, my name is Bob, and I'm an alcoholic." Liz was in the wrong meeting.
Yes, I
was. But John, thank you so much for being on.
And it was Alcoholics Anonymous. I couldn't even get their mailing addresses.
But John, God bless
thank you both. I really appreciate the opportunity. As always.
John, it's such a treat to talk to you.
Well,
thanks,
thank
John.
you.
God bless. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Really, Liz, really a remarkable man, John Nickerson. He's done so many things in his life, and he's helped so many people. And he used to pilot destroyers at one point in the Navy, and went from that to he actually went from that to living in the streets, and then picking himself back up and becoming a successful actor, and then starting this institute. So he's really a remarkable guy.
Well, and one of the things that I'm so struck when you hear someone like John talk, and frankly, just again back to reading everything about John McCain, and even several months ago about Barbara Bush when she died, is that I hope so much, as I know you do, that our kids and their peers will have the benefit of some of these life stories and really get to know that John McCain wasn't John McCain the way they know him now, that he started as something, 6 years ago, and John Nickerson did too, and so do all these other people, because that's what makes these people so special. It's the way they've given back, often very quietly over the years, in addition to publicly, but they also do, it's the quiet gestures and all of their life lessons that make them such valuable national treasures to us.
That's right. And often the way they pick themselves back up. I mean, that's
exactly. And, the way, you read the John McCain, over and over again, we've heard the same stories, his disappointment with running for office the first time and losing, and then running the second time and losing. And then they become just stories that are repeated, and you stop for a moment and you think, and it's much more, actually more significantly, his 5.5 years as a POW, and you think, wait a minute here, we are talking about a human being, a man who was in captivity, mostly in solitary confinement, who came out of it, and look what he did. Or somebody who went through an addiction like John Nickerson just talked about. I mean, that's the strength, that inner strength that didn't come from a title or a power or holding elected office or going to the Naval Academy. That's something to behold.
That's right. You just reminded me by saying that he losing the race over and over again, and kind of in a Lincoln way. He was also McCain was just so darn funny when he came and spoke to us in Manhattan. I remember he told the story about he talked to Morris Udall, who was another he was Democrat running for president. Udall was a Democrat, is that right, Liz? I believe so.
From Arizona.
From Arizona, and so McCain said, you just can't win. No one's ever going to elect a president from Arizona. Ask Morris Udall. Ask Goldwater. And he said when Morris Udall came over and said to him, I once walked into a barbershop and said, I'm Morris Udall and I'm running for president. This is in New Hampshire. And the barber turned around and said, yeah, we were just laughing about that.
Yeah, he used to tell that story. Yes. John McCain's mother, Roberta, is still alive. She's 106. I mean, what kind of a life has she's led? Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Now, she was even on TV with him during his last election, and I've seen a live picture of her maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, but I suspect we'll be seeing her at the funeral.
Yeah.
Really something.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people heading to Washington. I'm heading down on Friday to do when he's laying in state. I'm going to bring my daughter down, who is 11,
that's
about
terrific.
12. Yeah, she's not very happy with me, but she will be when she's 40. So.
Well, she will be a reminder that I drag my kids to the town halls in New Hampshire.
That's right. That's right.
Over Christmas break, right? So,
yep.
Oh no, once she gets there, as you know, this is again. When else will you see tribute paid like we're going to see this later this week?
And so who's going to be the next? And who's going to be the next Maverick? I mean, who's out there that's going to take that mantle? You just don't know. I mean, whether and again, there probably are people listening that didn't particularly care for John McCain at times. I mean, he could be irascible. He could go the other way. You talked about his opposition to waterboarding, and that was soon after 9/11, when the public sentiment was very much the other way, including mine. But I think the country benefits from somebody scratching it out and irritating the oyster.
Well, two things. On your first point, who's the next Maverick? I don't see one actually don't even like the word anymore. I think it's been overused. But Susan Collins said the other day there are no more lions of the Senate. You know, she was referring to Ted Kennedy dying, ironically and tragically, of the exact same disease, glioblastoma, as McCain. And I wanted to send her a note and say, well, how about a lioness? You know, I don't know who, certainly within the Senate who's there. Nobody comes to mind. I got to, unfortunately. But, you know, back to what some of the stuff McCain did, you talk about going against the grain. He was pushing for immigration reform as a Republican when most Republicans were ignoring it. And in fact, it's one of the things that really hurt him in the 2008 primary. It was the summer of 2007, and he got way out there on it. And he said, I'm not going to back down. This is something we need to do. And at the time, Marco Rubio, you know, several other Republicans started working with Chuck Schumer and Dick Durbin and some Democrats to get something done. And as you know, as we all know, the whole thing unraveled. President Obama ran on immigration reform, and he didn't get anything done either. Right. And I think that's an issue. Listen, that's just got to get resolved. But I don't see the leadership on that either. Now it's just a bunch of name calling and labeling and screaming. Build the wall, don't build the wall. You know, it's a lot more than that.
Liz, you remind me. First of all, is my audio gone haywire?
No,
once in a while. Perfect. Oh, good. Once in a while, it does.
Now.
But
yeah,
you reminded me so much of a debate that year. Where it was a Republican debate, a primary debate, and immigration was the hot topic, as it still is. And the Republican candidates, there felt like there were 12 of them, and I think there were 6 or 7. And one after the other was trying to sound harder and harder on immigration. And I'm pretty tough on immigration, you know. But McCain, and so, you know, that was the tone of it. But McCain stopped and said, wait. He goes, please, can we remember that we're talking about God's children? And I felt awful because I was kind of cheering on the tough talk, but he would do that, and that was not to his benefit. When we talked before about sometimes you know, admitting your faults and confessing to the public of your life is politically helpful. That was not politically helpful, nor was it politically helpful for him to tell the woman in Arizona, I believe, also, you know, no, Barack Obama isn't an Arab that's planning to take down America. And it probably cost him points. I don't think it helped him whatsoever. But that's you got to admire that type of thing.
Well, you know, and Republicans were very suspicious of him. The more he, quote unquote, crossed the aisle, you know, the more that these litmus tests, he certainly wasn't passing a lot of them. That's for sure. He was also the first person I saw or heard who said during the immigration debate, say, well, what are we going to do? Round up 12 million illegal or undocumented immigrants and throw them out? Let's get real here. Let's just get real and have a practical conversation about what we're dealing with and how we can resolve it. And people don't we know this, they don't talk in those terms. We talk around them.
Right.
We talk around them.
People weren't ready to hear that yet. And I think, you know, with President Trump, you know, you've got somebody super hard on immigration. And, you know, with Trump, you're not going to get 12 million people rounded up and sent out. It just doesn't work. And you know, but I don't think they were willing to accept that from McCain. But that was just the flat out truth. I mean, that's the fact of it. I mean, rounding up to 12 million people would hurt us more than it would hurt them. It would hurt the rest of us.
No, and you know, the fact that he showed some humanity there. So your point about, you know, these are God's children. It's just like talking about healthcare. We always talk about the policies and the structure and the formulas and the money, and then you stop and say, can we just talk about the patients for a minute? And I'm not taking a position on the issue. I'm just saying we don't talk about these things in terms of people. And I think when the whole waterboarding debate was going on, and I'm with you, I was all for it until I was against it.
Right.
But when you hear McCain talk about it, you know, there was not another person in the discussion who could actually stand up and say, believe me, I was waterboarded, it doesn't work.
Right.
And here's
exactly.
why it doesn't. And here's why it doesn't work.
And I'm just one more jumbo jet away from going back to agreeing with it, you know. But still,
it depends on the day.
It depends on the day.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, but right. When you hear it from somebody who's been through it, you know, you have to listen to them. You know what I mean? And you got to respect it whether you want to hear it or not. And that's the thing, you know.
No. What do you think? If anything, this period of reflection, or you will, will mean going forward for the operations of the Senate and even just in public discourse at the local level even. Do you think there will be any improvement or progress in actually getting some things done, which, as you know, McCain was calling for in his last speech on the Senate floor?
I think for no more than 7 seconds. I think there may be some handshakes for the cameras and that type of thing, but then they're going to go right back at it. I got to say, Liz, I was, McCain's final words, what he left for Americans, I was upset that it was encapsulated into an anti-Trump hit by the media. And maybe there was a dig in there, but I thought what he said was so much bigger than any one president or any one senator. It was a really good message. And when you're going to leave, when you've lived a life like that, and you're going to leave a few words for posterity, you choose them very carefully. And the headline on those was, McCain hits Trump on the way out. It just trivialized it so much. It really kind of made me a little bit sick. I'm not sure your take on it.
No, I think that's right. And well, obviously there was a message in that. He wrote those words very intentionally. You can bet he selected every single one of them with great effort. He's been talking that way about America for a long time. It's what our ideals are. And I agree with you. And I think, frankly, what happened today at the White House with the flag at half-staff was really unfortunate. I just don't understand it at all. But this is not about Donald Trump. John McCain, period, full stop. John McCain lived his life for 81 years serving this country, and he was around long before Donald Trump, and his legacy is going to live on for generations. And it's more than unfortunate. It's maddening to see that the press focuses on the comparison of the two. That's just not what this should be about.
It's not. It's absolutely not. It's funny that McCain, who came from such a distinguished military family, they went back to the Revolution. But it was his view of being American and his view of giving to the country, and it was so ingrained. I went to a really, really fancy party once. I was single in New York, and somebody must have dropped dead because there was a slot opened up and they needed a guy that wasn't going to get too drunk or like be too obnoxious. So I got picked. It was like this black tie and sashes thing. And I got there, and there were a lot of Europeans, but particularly there were a number of British men. Every one of them served in the military. They were aristocrats. They were all very wealthy, and it was, of course, they were all Scots Guard or Royal Grenadiers. And they, I asked, "What made you do that?" And they looked at me like I was crazy. They had done it in their family for 500 years, and it was just what you do. You serve your country. And I think McCain saw America that way, and we got away from that. We got to a point where if you're wealthy and you get to go to college, you skip out on service, and you don't really have to do it, and everybody else gets stuck doing it. There's no skin in the game for the leadership class, if there is one still, but there is. And there's not as much skin in the game. And I think McCain realized that, and he lived a way to make sure that there was still some there. And it made me think about that.
So who do you think are the next big leaders, either who are already in Washington now, or maybe down at the state level or local level, who will rise up, because we need them?
It can't just be anti-Trumpers like you say Ben Sasse or Flake or the ones that have spoken up against Donald Trump. It's not enough. I mean, that wasn't what John McCain was about. He spoke up about a lot of different things. And he disagreed with a lot of people. I mean, he's running for office, and he backed the surge in Iraq, which I think was about as popular as herpes. And he came in and did it. It can't be just about I'm not with him. I don't know who's out there like that. I thought Trey Gowdy has some moments of that where he'll speak out in different directions, just what he thinks. But he's leaving the House as well. I don't think there's any clear person out there who could be that person, but it's a great opportunity. I mean, a job just opened and somebody should take it.
Yeah. Well, you like Ben Sasse. Isn't he one of your guys?
I like him. Yeah. He speaks his mind. I think there's a possibility there. I mean, I think there's a possibility for a lot of people, but it's, it's very difficult to do. I mean, as you know so well, Liz, we both come out of the same industry. You can't cross the line of the liberal media if you're on the left or the conservative media if you're on the right, more than once in a career, or you're never trusted again. So you
right,
really have
that's exactly right.
You really have to have a pretty strong set of characters to continually speak your mind and endure the backlash, because you just get your head ripped off. I mean, the talk radio on either side will tear you up. The internet trolls will tear you up. You will get ripped if you do that. So you need somebody with enough backbone to stand up to it, and we'll see. We'll see who's out there.
Well, this gets right back to how, we even started to consider doing this show, is that we believe in term limits. And I think that one of the best ways to get a lot more straight talk from all of these elected officials, and to get people who are, to work to get things done, whether it's in the same party or with the other party or whichever, or no party, is if jobs aren't threatened and elected officials aren't spending their time trolling for money and trolling for votes and trolling for editorial board endorsements. They're actually out there doing their jobs, because, it's amazing how much courage you'll have if you don't need your job.
You also, you have, 51 Republicans in the Senate. You could have one of them that could demand a term limit vote, or you don't get my vote on anything else. Somebody could do that. Yeah. Somebody could step forward and say, I want to see a movement on the amendment, or otherwise I'm not voting on anything. Where's that kind of courage? You don't see it.
No. And I know there's a lot of talk about so many of these Republicans in particular who are not running again because they just don't want to deal with the Trump factor, which to me is absurd. If you're going to, whatever that's supposed to mean.
You want to fight, stay and fight, right, exactly.
Stay and fight and stand up for something and, fight for your principles. But to blame it on external circumstances, frankly, we don't want those people in office.
Right, that's right. I hear our music playing.
Is it our favorite song?
It's our favorite song. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
John McCain. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Yes, it is.